What's up, folks? This is Justin from Books, Bricks, and Boards, and today I am going to talk to you about how you can gonzo your game and what you need to buy to get started with Dungeon Crawl Classics.
The final battle between the armies of the cold and the keepers of the flame is about to begin.
Alright, so this is probably not a surprise, but the first thing you're going to need to buy is the core rulebook. Now, this core rulebook is going to be everything that you technically need to play the game. So this is going to have your players' information, your dungeon master's information, or judge as they call them in Dungeon Crawl Classics. It's also going to have a bestiary, and it's got 2 adventures in the more recent versions of the core rules. It's got a funnel adventure for 0 levels to get you started, and then it's also got a 2nd level adventure. Another great thing about these books is when you buy them from Goodman Games, Goodman also gives you a PDF copy for free. So that is a fantastic value. You've got a whole game in one book. It is a gorgeous book. The art is awesome. It's very well made. It's got the Smith-sewn binding. It's got the ribbons. And as an added benefit, they have only done minor revisions over the course of the life of this entire game. And so if you can find a used copy, even from 5, 6, or 8 years ago, you can still play straight out of that and have no problems whatsoever. You don't have to worry about additions with this game. But your number one thing you're going to need to buy is the Dungeon Crawl Classics role-playing game core rulebook. Okay, so you've bought your core rulebook, you've read it, you know how to play, and you want to get started. Well, technically, even in the core rulebook, you can just use a standard set of polyhedrals to play the game. But if you decide to do it that way, you're really missing out on one of the weird additions for Dungeon Crawl Classics that makes it stand out from the pack. And those are the zaki dice. So the zaki dice have some wacky dice in there. So it's not just your standard 20s, 10s, 8s, and whatnot. You also have your D30s or your D24s. You've got your D16s and your D14s. So this allows you to take full advantage of what Dungeon Crawl Classics calls the dice chain. So rather than +1s or +2s to hit, you go up or down die in the Dungeon Crawl Classics game, and it really makes the game feel different from what you're accustomed to. There are many options for these zaki dice now, and you can actually just buy what they call the Special 7, which are the 7 dice that don't come in your standard polyhedral set. So you could make a polyhedral set into a zaki set, as I've done here. As you can see, these don't really match the zaki dice. So that is a way to do this on the cheap. But Goodman Games has sets available, as does Impact Miniatures. If you are familiar with my channel, you know I love Impact Miniatures, so I'm happy to send you their way. You can get a copy of the Special 7 dice to upgrade your existing polyhedrals for about 15 bucks, and it's going to greatly increase the experience with Dungeon Crawl Classics, and that's why zaki dice are my number 2 purchase. All right, don't adjust your screens. You are not now watching a different video. I do think that my number 3 purchase suggestion for you for Dungeon Crawl Classics is going to be the Mutant Crawl Classics RPG, and here's why. They both use the same base system, so they're very easily interchangeable. By buying the Mutant Crawl Classics book, you're going to get a few character classes that you may or may not want to introduce into your world because they are a little bit more sci-fi than what some folks want in their Dungeon Crawl Classics, even though several of the Dungeon Crawl Classics adventure modules do have sci-fi elements already. No, but the other thing is, this is going to give you a big book of monsters. It's going to give you some wacky sci-fi artifacts that you could use. Maybe they're lost Atlantean technology in your world if you don't want to go full-on weird sci-fantasy. And then it is also going to give you an additional zero level funnel. Again, it's going to be science fantasy themed, but I do think this would be a good investment. Again, you buy it from Goodman Games, you get the PDF and the hardcover for one low price. And you have the option of doing some weird sci-fi to go along with your Dungeon Crawl Classics game. You effectively double what you can do with both systems with this simple purchase. And that's why this is my number 3 buying guide purchase for Dungeon Crawl Classics. This is going to be my number 4, and this is the Dungeon Crawl Classics reference sheet book. So this doesn't look like it's that exciting of a purchase until you see what it has in it. So this actually has a huge number of the tables from the core rulebook that you're going to be frequently referencing. You got a cleric and you need to figure out what you need to roll to turn some undead. It's in here. You roll a critical hit and you need to know what you can do. It's in here. You roll a fumble. It's in here. Mercurial magic. Disapproval effects from your patrons, from your gods. Corruption. It's all in here. Also, equipment tables, weapon tables, those kind of things. So this is like $10, and it's going to be a huge benefit to your table because you're not going to be flipping through a 500-page book to find the individual table that you're looking for. They just restocked this over at Goodman Games, and this is a great investment for anybody that's wanting to run Dungeon Crawl Classics. And that's why this is my number 4 buyer's guide purchase for Dungeon Crawl Classics. And here is my number 5 suggestion for purchase for Dungeon Crawl Classics. And no, I don't just mean this specific adventure module, even though it is a very fun one, which I have ran. I'm talking about get some modules. Dungeon Crawl Classics plays different than most RPGs, and to get a real feel for it, you need to play some of the modules as they've written them first so that you can kind of work your way into the more gonzo style that they're so great at portraying. And there are so many options out there. I got this one off of, I believe, DriveThruRPG. You can get these for just a few bucks, and you can print them off. I actually do prefer to have the PDF copies of the adventures rather than the hard copies because I like to write on them as I am running the adventure, and I don't want to do that to a nice printed copy. So go out, look through some of the options, pick up Sailors on the Starless Sea, or one of the many different ones available from Goodman Games. But these adventures are great, especially the funnels. You could get, you could also do some of their fantastic X-Crawls, which is like a futuristic fantasy game show a la Blade Runner playing with the DCC system. I've ran several of those. Those are a blast. There are horror-themed ones. There's just a really great variety. If there's a type of adventure that you want to run, it's available somewhere in the Dungeon Crawl Classics lineup. And that is why that's my number 5, and that is something that you definitely need to consider picking up for getting started with Dungeon Crawl Classics. All right, and here is an honorable mention for me. This is the Dungeon Crawl Classics Lankmar campaign setting box set. This has got an adventure in it. It's got books about the world of Niwan. It's got a great map, and it's got a player's book that gives the different rules changes specific to this setting. If you're a big Fritz Leiber fan and you want to play in a world that really evokes his style, this is an awesome way to do that. It is, in my opinion, a better reflection of his work than the other available options to play in Lankmar, those being Savage Worlds and also Dungeons & Dragons. But this is a honorable mention because it is going to be specific if you're into the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser stories. But if you are, this is a great pickup, and it's very inexpensive. It'll run you about $50, and you get a lot of content for that value. And there are a number of adventures to continue your campaign in the world of Nawan and Lankmar. So that is my honorable mention. And without going too long, I'm going to say, hope you liked the video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, this has been Justin with Books, Bricks, and Boards. Good gaming, and God bless.